On the 7th day after my master forcibly threw me down the mountain, I finally found the home I lost 15 years ago by following the compass. Standing in front of the gate, I announced my family name, but the security guard looked at me with a contemptuous sneer. "What lunatic is this? The Sioux family's eldest daughter was found 5 years ago. Today is the engagement banquet for the eldest daughter and the Shin family's young master, so get lost." I tilted my head and saw the welcome sign at the entrance clearly read, "Shanhuizhou Susan Wanshin forever and love me." I'm still here. How am I engaged to someone already? Amused by the scene before me, I suddenly remembered what my master had foretold for me. A cuckoo in the nest, repaid kindness with revenge, a harbinger of misfortune. Are you sure the Sioux family's eldest daughter was found 5 years ago? I stood there, looking at the security guard with a half-smile. Of course, the security guard retorted impatiently. I've seen plenty of people like you, just wanting to get rich overnight by impersonating the eldest daughter. The eldest daughter has proper keepsakes and even had a DNA test done. You think just any Tom, Dick, or Harry can come and impersonate her? Suddenly, a gentle voice came over. What's wrong? I followed the sound and saw a woman in a red evening gown standing at the door, looking somewhat familiar. The expression on her face immediately showed some surprise when she saw me. She recognizes me? The security guard hurried over, respectfully saying, "Miss, this person keeps claiming she's the real Sioux family's eldest daughter. We can't get her to leave." Hearing this, Susan Wanshin's face changed, and she immediately scolded, "Why are you still listening to her nonsense? Get her out of here. If the engagement banquet is delayed, none of you can afford the consequences." The security guard was startled by Susan Wanshin's ferocious expression and quickly lowered his head, saying, "Gee, yes, miss, we'll get her out of here right away. Someone." I reacted quickly, kicking one of them away first, but more security guards rushed forward and restrained me. Seeing Susan Wanshin so anxious, I immediately shouted at the top of my lungs, "Help! Someone is impersonating the Sioux family's eldest daughter. The imposter is attacking people." Susan Wanshin's face turned pale with fright, and she shouted in a panic, "Shut her mouth." Just then, a voice came from behind Susan Wanshin. "Wanshin, what's wrong?" Seeing the security guards hesitating, I seized the opportunity to break free from their grip and, after looking at the man, concluded, "You must be Shanhuizhou. The Susan Wanshin in front of you is not the Sioux family's eldest daughter. She's stolen my identity. I have proof." Hearing this, Susan Wanshin became even more flustered, and she urgently grabbed Shanhuizhou's hand, saying, "Shan, this woman is a con artist from who knows where. Don't believe her." Seeing my determined gaze, Shanhuizhou hesitated for a moment, then unhesitatingly grasped Susan Wanshin's hand in return. "What are the security guards doing? Get this fraud out of here. Throw her as far away as possible. I'll take responsibility for anything that happens." Susan Wanshin was stunned, and then her face was filled with joy. The security guards also realized that Shanhuizhou was determined to protect Susan Wanshin, and they immediately grabbed sticks from the side, ready to beat me down and drag me out. My face turned slightly cold. My master taught me face reading and fortune telling. But he was afraid of breaking his old bones, so he didn't teach me how to fight. As I was thinking, a wooden stick came straight at my back. I couldn't dodge in time, and my arm was hit hard. Ignoring the sharp pain in my arm, I violently snatched the wooden stick and then slammed it hard into the window. Crash! The sound of shattering glass was accompanied by screams from the guests. The doors burst open, and a wealthy couple rushed out. "What's going on?" I recognized my biological parents at a glance, and before Susan Wanshin and Shanhuizhou could speak, I said, "My name is Susan Yanli." That simple sentence immediately changed Mr. Su's expression. "How do you know that name?" 22 years ago, when the Sioux family's eldest daughter was born, a priest passed by and told their fortune, saying that the Sioux family's eldest daughter had a weak fate. To change her fate, she must not see outsiders before the age of 7 and could not say her real name before the age of 18. Therefore, for so many years, no one knew that the Sioux family's eldest daughter's original name was Susan Yanli. Except for the Sioux family, including the lost Susan Yanli. Why wouldn't I know my own name? I stared at Susan Wanshin and suddenly smiled. But why is this so-called Miss Sue so eager to drive me away as soon as she sees me? All eyes focused on Susan Wansheen. Shan immediately protected Susan Wansheen, saying, "Uncle and Aunt, are you going to listen to what this woman of unknown origin has to say? Wansheen has suffered so much to come back and has lost a lot of memories. Maybe she accidentally revealed her name on the way." Susan Wansheen also immediately gained confidence, and she eagerly showed the scar on her hand. "Can't the scar on my hand from protecting my brother prove it? What if she knows the name? Does she also have this scar?" After saying that, before anyone else could react, Susan Wansheen suddenly rushed over. I instinctively pushed her away, but my jacket was torn off, revealing my smooth, jade-like arm. "Well, you little bitch, what else do you have to say?" Mrs. Sue immediately became angry, and her gaze towards me was full of malice. I tugged at the corner of my mouth and put on my jacket. That thing was so ugly, of course, I had surgery to remove it. "And Susan Wansheen, so what if you have this scar? Can you say specifically where and why this scar came from?" Susan Wansheen's face stiffened, and she hurriedly said, "Burns, it's a burn. My brother took me out to play with fire, and I accidentally got it." I shook my head with a chuckle and said, "Wrong, I was led to a small grove. My brother came to the small grove to find me, but he got lost by accident. To keep warm, we lit firewood, but we didn't notice that it burned the nearby dry wood. I helped my brother block that piece of dry wood. Oh, right, and a mole behind my ear, and a butterfly birthmark on my shoulder." I pulled off my jacket without hesitation, revealing those marks, and looked at Susan Wansheen, whose face was pale, and said with a half-smile, "What should we do now? You have them, but I have them all." Susachuan, who had rushed over after hearing these words, was also stunned. Mr. and Mrs. Sue hurriedly looked at Susachuan, but Susachuan was silent for a moment, then nodded. "She's right." Mrs. Sue's eyes went dark upon hearing this, and she staggered back a few steps, saying, This, who exactly is my daughter?" Seeing that Mr. and Mrs. Sue were also somewhat shaken, Susan Wansheen rushed forward anxiously, saying, "Dad, Mom, are you really going to believe this person of unknown origin? Don't forget, I was the one who found you with the keepsake, and you did a DNA test. Today is supposed to be my and Sean's big day, but someone popped up to impersonate me. Who knows what her intentions are?" Her panicked words immediately stabilized the hearts of Mr. and Mrs. Sue, which had been wavering. "That's right, we did a DNA test back then," Mrs. Sue murmured. The Sue family had been thriving in recent years, and there were many people who impersonated the Sue family's lost eldest daughter. Some even bought the Sue family's servants at high prices, trying to get a bit of information to trick the Sue family. Therefore, when Susan Wansheen came to their door, even though Susan Wansheen had keepsakes and those marks, they still did a DNA test. Mr. Sue thought even further, and he looked suspicious. "Young lady, who sent you here? Specially picking today, what is your purpose?" I felt absurd, and at this moment, Mr. and Mrs. Shin also came out. The first time I saw Shan Yuezhou, I frowned involuntarily. "Back then, you brought Susan Wansheen to the Sue family?" All eyes focused on Shan Yuezhou, and Mrs. Shin, after learning everything that had happened here, looked at me vigilantly, saying, "What kind of con artist is this? My Shan only met Wansheen after she was found. Don't talk nonsense here." Seeing Mrs. Shin so certain, I carefully looked at Shan Yuezhou's and Susan Wansheen's faces and suddenly smiled. Waterside, many trees, birds, northwest, crossroads. This should be where you first met. According to the calculation of your fate lines, the distance should not exceed 30 kilometers. That's Lakeside Park next to Nixon Island, I'm not wrong, right? Mr. Shin was about to reprimand me, but he glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw his son silently hanging his head. "Sean, what's going on?" Shan Yuezhou didn't say anything, and I forced a smile. "I'm lucky. After I got lost, I was adopted and taught some fortune-telling and face-reading things. If you still refuse to admit it, I don't mind saying more. But then, I can't guarantee that those things are what you want to be made public." Hearing this, Shan Yuezhou immediately became anxious. "Yes, I was the one who brought Wansheen to the Sue family." "Sean, what's going on?" Mrs. Shin didn't expect to be slapped in the face so quickly, and she quickly grabbed Sean Yuezhou's arm and questioned him. Why didn't you say these things before? Sean Yuezhou looked at Susan Wanxin with embarrassment and said, I just happened to be passing by at that time, and Wanxin held onto me tightly and refused to let go. She insisted that she was the Su family's eldest daughter and even held up that jade plaque for me to see. I thought it looked very similar at the time, and I thought it wouldn't hurt to try. Then I helped Wanxin. After saying that, Sean Yuezhou suddenly gained confidence again. So what if I helped? There's a DNA test. Doesn't that already prove that Wanxin is the Su family's eldest daughter? What's more, this woman is of unknown origin. Maybe she accidentally learned about my helping Wanxin from somewhere. Now she's deliberately mystifying things. I think she has ulterior motives. Sean Yuezhou reprimanded me urgently, and I frowned slightly, feeling that the people in front of me were extremely chaotic. Perhaps because of the misfortune, I, who used to be unfailingly accurate in face reading, now saw Susan Wanxin and the others as if they were covered in a layer of fog. Especially between Susan Wanxin and Sean Yuezhou, there was a blurred intertwining of double lines. Ulterior motives? I sighed and slowly shook my head, saying, actually, if it weren't necessary, I wouldn't want to go this far. As I spoke, I took out a document from my bag and threw it to Su Zichuan. Seeing the 4 words DNA test report on the document, the faces of the people in front of me changed instantly. Take a look. Back then, in order to find me, you left samples at St. Jude Hospital. Anyone who thinks they have a clue can go and do their own DNA test report. After Susan Wanxin came back, you were too happy and actually forgot about this. This is the DNA test report I just did. St. Jude Hospital is controlled by the Su family. You shouldn't think I'm faking it, right? Nowadays, everyone emphasizes science, so I naturally didn't plan to let them believe me with just a few simple words. That's why I prepared this DNA test report in advance. I didn't think I would need it, but I still had to take it out. Mr. and Mrs. Su hurriedly leaned over to look. I made 3 copies of the DNA test report, one for Mr. Su, one for Mrs. Su, and one for Su Zichuan, but each one clearly stated that I was their biological daughter and biological sister. Impossible! Susan Wanxin's face was pale, and she took a step back, saying, how is this possible? I'm the Su family's eldest daughter, what are you? Just then, Mr. Su's phone rang. As soon as he answered, an anxious and apprehensive voice entered everyone's ears. President Su, a girl just took 3 DNA test reports from St. Jude Hospital. The report results show that she is the Su family's eldest daughter. Also, that girl said her name is Susan Yanli. After he finished speaking, everyone present was stunned. There were also people whispering, what's going on? How can there be 2 Su family eldest daughters who passed the DNA test report? That's right, I didn't hear that they were twins back then. What twins? Speaking of which, this girl looks quite similar to Mrs. Su when she was young. The whispers entered everyone's ears, and Susan Wanxin was immediately stared at by various strange gazes. She looked around, wanting to grab Su Zichuan's hand, but Su Zichuan silently avoided it. Seeing that Mr. and Mrs. Su were also silent, Susan Wanxin immediately looked at Sean Yuezhou with tears in her eyes. Sean, today is our engagement banquet. Don't tell me that even you don't want to believe me? Sean Yuezhou looked at Susan Wanxin with heartache and wiped away her tears in a panic. Wanxin, don't cry. The wife I want has always been only you. If I have to marry someone else, I'd rather die. Susan Wanxin was even more moved and leaned on Sean Yuezhou's shoulder, crying softly. Sean Yuezhou looked at Mr. and Mrs. Shin, and Mrs. Shin sighed and tugged at Mr. Shin's sleeve, wanting to say something but stopping. With 3 DNA test reports coming out and Susan Wanxin's evasive attitude, the truth was about to come out. But Sean Yuezhou clearly wanted to protect Susan Wanxin, and this marriage was the Su family begging the Shin family to get on the Shin family's new project. Mr. Shin took a deep breath. And walked to Mr. Su's side, saying, in my life, I only have one son, Sean. In the future, the entire Shin family will be handed over to him. Naturally, I also hope that he marries someone he likes. It's best to be a good match, but if they're not a good match, it doesn't matter. But I advise you to carefully consider who will lose if this marriage doesn't work out. It's hard to say. Mr. Su immediately understood what Mr. Shin meant. He looked at Mrs. Su, and Mrs. Su hesitated, saying, Wan Shin has always been understanding and lovable. For the past 5 years, I've also treated her as my own daughter. Her hesitant words made Su Sichuan look at them in disbelief. Dad, Mom, what do you mean by these words? Susan is your daughter, my sister. We didn't pay attention and let her get lost, causing her to suffer so many years. We even let someone else take everything she should have enjoyed, almost making her unable to come back for the rest of her life. Now that Susan has finally come back, what are you saying? Mr. and Mrs. Su didn't speak, but among the guests, one person suddenly frowned and said, This young lady, why do I find her a bit familiar? As soon as he said that, his face suddenly changed, and he rushed to me excitedly, saying, I remember. I don't know if Master Yuan Tian came to Washington, D.C. with you? Seeing me frown, the man quickly explained, 3 years ago, I went bankrupt and was burdened with a lot of debt. I climbed Mount Yale at night, wanting to find a way out, and you and Master Yuan Tian pointed the way for me. You said that I had this hurdle in my fate, and if I passed it, I would have a smooth road ahead. If I went 3 miles west down the mountain, I would definitely meet a benefactor who would save my life. I've always wanted to find Master Yuan Tian to thank him, but Master Yuan Tian and you are always low-key and travel everywhere. So over the years, I haven't had a chance to thank you. I didn't expect to meet you here today. I then remembered who the man in front of me was, and my brows unconsciously relaxed. No need to thank me. Meeting me and my master means that your life shouldn't end, it's fate. Do more good deeds in the future and be a good person. Everyone was in an uproar and then whispered to each other. Isn't this President Zhang of Ningkong Group? After going bankrupt, I heard that he saved old Mr. Wang and soared to success. The Master Yuan Tian he's talking about wouldn't be the legendary Master Yuan Tian, would it? As soon as the name Master Yuan Tian came out, the scorching gazes coming from all directions immediately surrounded me. Mr. Su hurriedly stepped forward and asked, Susan, are you really Master Yuan Tian's close disciple? Mr. Shin's face also turned ugly. The weight of Master Yuan Tian was something that even 10 Shin families couldn't compare to. To be enemies with Master Yuan Tian's disciple for the sake of Shan Yuezhou's so-called true love was something he didn't want to do. Mrs. Shin, who was on the side, naturally knew this, and the gaze she gave Susan Wanxin clearly showed some displeasure. Seeing this situation, Su Sichuan directly pulled Mr. Su away. Dad, what do you mean by this? Don't tell me that if Susan has nothing to do with Master Yuan Tian, you're going to refuse to recognize her and let someone else take everything that belongs to her? Mrs. Su saw that the father and son were arguing, and she hurried forward to persuade him. Sichuan, this is your dad. What are you doing? Su Sichuan ignored Mrs. Su and instead looked at me with concern, saying, Susan, tell your brother what you're thinking. Your brother respects you. I glanced at Susan Wanxin's almost distorted expression and smiled. Why don't you finish this engagement first? The engagement naturally wouldn't continue. The Shin family dared to force the Su family to give up a penniless biological daughter, but they didn't dare to offend a close disciple of Master Yuan Tian. No matter how much Shan Yuezhou loved Susan Wanxin, he knew that this marriage wasn't that simple. A high-profile engagement banquet ended hastily. I entered the Su family as I wished, and Mr. and Mrs. Su looked at me in a flattering manner. Susan, it's good that you're back. I've arranged the largest room facing north for you to live in. Aunt Lee has already gone to clean it up. If you're not satisfied, we'll redo it. Hearing this, Susan Wanxin stood up directly and said, Mom, that's my room. Presumptuous. Mr. Su scolded, impatiently saying, Who said this is your room? That room belongs to my daughter. You're an imposter. How dare you compete with Susan for it? Susan Wanxin's eyes immediately turned red, and her gaze towards me showed some hatred. I was too lazy to watch such a clumsy drama and asked, the Su family suddenly has 2 daughters. So how are you going to announce it to the outside world? Mr. and Mrs. Su looked at each other, and finally, Mrs. Su answered. Susan, the group has a very important project recently. It cares a lot about its reputation to the outside world. It's not good to say that we found the wrong person. Why don't we announce to the outside world that you're identical twins? You're the older sister, and Wanxin is the younger sister. Let's leave this marriage with the Shin family to Wanxin, okay? Susan Wanxin immediately understood what Mr. and Mrs. Su meant, and the tears that had been welling up in her eyes immediately receded, and her face showed some joy. When Su Sichuan heard this, he stood up anxiously, but I directly reached out and pushed Su Sichuan down. What's wrong? Unwilling to give up Susan Wanxin as such a good marriage prospect, and unwilling to offend the Shin family. So you're trying to persuade me? I didn't expect that I would expose everything without any mercy. Mr. Su's expression immediately became serious, and he said unhappily, do you want Su family to tell everyone that they spent 10 years looking for an imposter? What's more, you haven't learned anything and don't know anything. Look at yourself. How are you worthy of the title of the Su family's eldest daughter? You clearly had the ability to find your way back, so why didn't you look for it? You insisted on making trouble on the day the Shin family and the Su family were getting engaged. I think you're doing this on purpose. Mr. Su slammed the table and looked at me with anger in his eyes. I smiled sarcastically and asked, then I also want to ask you. The Su family's mansion is remote and has tight security. How could kidnappers take such a big risk and kidnap me under the protection and supervision of so many people? And they didn't ask you for a penny. Was it really just an accident that I got lost back then? As soon as these words were spoken, Mrs. Su's lips trembled. The servants working on the side lowered their heads even lower, holding their breath unconsciously. Susan, what do you mean by this? Are you suspecting that we deliberately lost you and then pretended to be looking for you for the past 10 years? Tears dripped from Mrs. Su's eyes, and her eyes showed a hint of disappointment. If we really didn't want you, we could have just thrown you away from the beginning. Why would we raise you so well for so many years? Su Sichuan also persuaded, Susan, it was my fault that I didn't take good care of you back then. But all of this really has nothing to do with Dad and Mom. For so many years, as soon as they heard any news about you, they immediately ran to look for you. There was even one time when it was rumored that you were kidnapped to a big mountain. I wanted to go, but Dad and Mom insisted on stopping me and going themselves, and they encountered a mudslide and almost lost their lives. Susan, blame your brother if you want to. I pulled Su Sichuan's hand away and smiled softly. Everyone has misunderstood something. I don't blame anyone, and I don't hate anyone. But I want to investigate what happened when I got lost back then, and how Susan Wanxin impersonated me one by one. My master once told me my fortune. A cuckoo in the nest, repaid kindness with revenge, a harbinger of misfortune. Those 12 words made everyone present change their expressions. Su Sichuan looked at Susan Wanxin unkindly and said directly, after all is said and done, you still haven't told us. How exactly did you impersonate Susan? Hearing this, Susan Wanxin's face turned pale with fright, and she stammered for a long time. Finally, under the threat of calling the police, she finally spoke. I'm an orphan. There's a mental hospital next to the orphanage. The director there gives us money to clean. There happened to be a crazy aunt living there who talked nonsense all day long. Later, I found out that she was the nanny who took care of the eldest daughter of the Su family back then. After the eldest daughter disappeared, she was fired, and her husband abused her and forced her to go crazy. So I learned a lot of things from her mouth, and then I happened to see that keepsake at a roadside stall. Then I was possessed by a ghost. After hearing these words, Mr. Su immediately sent someone to investigate. As it turned out, the nanny who took care of me when I was a child did stay in that mental hospital, but she died in an accident the day before yesterday. Su Sichuan was even more nervous because of his master's fortune-telling, and he immediately asked Susan Wanxin to move out of the Su family. But after spending so much time together over the past few years, Mrs. Su was also somewhat reluctant. Seeing everyone turn me into the evil person who forced them to separate, I simply opened my mouth. I'm not living in the Su family. Money is all I have. I've already bought the mansion next door. I hope you don't bother me if there's nothing wrong. For the Su family could speak, I picked up my things and left straight away. The mansion had already been cleaned, and I lay on the sofa, sighing as I looked at the pile of rejected calls and unread messages on my phone. My master, no matter how old he is, still loves to throw tantrums. He just didn't want to solve his fortune-telling, so he kicked me out in anger. I knew that my master was worried that the misfortune in the fortune-telling would target me and take my life. I thought I could solve it quickly, but I didn't expect that it would take a lot of thought. A cuckoo in the nest. Looking at the current situation, the target is directly pointing at Susan Wansheen. But if I don't actively look for the Sue family, Susan Wansheen naturally won't bother to look for me and harm me, so why does the fortune-telling show it like this? I suddenly sat up, and after thinking for a long time, I still decided to start with Susan Wansheen. The Sue family still announced directly that they were identical twins according to the original plan. I'm the older sister, and Susan Wansheen is the younger sister. In this way, they covered up all the things Susan Wansheen did back then and gave the Shin family a clean daughter-in-law. To show that it was a double blessing, they held Emilywas and Susan Wansheen's engagement banquet and the banquet to welcome me back to the Sue family together. The time was set for 7 days later. Sue Sichuan told me the news. He looked at me helplessly, holding the invitation. I persuaded Mom and Dad, but they still insisted on doing so. Susan, if you don't want to. No. I raised my hand to take the invitation and carefully read every word on it. This 7 days is enough. Susan Sichuan was used to me saying things he didn't understand. He ruffled my hair and sighed. Yanli, I know I've let you down. But I promise you, what's rightfully yours will be yours. I didn't respond, and Susan Sichuan could only leave in silence. Seemingly feeling gooey. LTY, Mr. and Mrs. Sue began to contact me frequently. Jewelry, houses, bags, homemade soup, pastries, all sorts of things were delivered to my doorstep. After rejecting the 76th gift, I looked at Mrs. Sue, who was full of expectation, and asked, "Are you contacting me so often because you're afraid I'll cause trouble at the engagement party tomorrow?" A simple sentence left Mrs. Sue stunned. She stumbled back, heartbroken. Yanli, I'm your own mother. Why do you think I have ulterior motives when I'm just trying to be good to you? I watched her indifferently and forced a smile. What if I cause trouble at the engagement party next year? Exposing that Susan Wansheen isn't a Sue, but you just didn't want to give up the Shin family's help, so you fabricated her identity. No! Mrs. Sue blurted out, her face turning pale. Yanli, please understand our situation. The group has been facing a lot of problems lately. Many companies were willing to help us, but you wouldn't let them. If we lose the Shin family too, then all your father's hard work will be ruined. I couldn't help but laugh, then suddenly leaned close to Mrs. Sue's ear and whispered, I've always known. You resent me. Before Mrs. Sue could speak, I interrupted her directly. Don't keep making up lies to deceive me. Don't worry, I'll leave here soon after things are settled. As my biological mother, you should hope I'm safe and sound, right? Enduring Mrs. Sue's complicated gaze, I turned and left without hesitation. The next morning, Susan Sichuan was waiting for me at my doorstep. When asked about Susan Wansheen, Susan Sichuan seemed indifferent. She has parents, and the Shin family is watching over her. She doesn't need me. I just need to take care of my little sister. It's my fault for not paying attention and allowing you to be abducted. This is what I should do. I didn't say anything, just silently followed Susan Sichuan to the banquet hall, seemingly to erase one's impression of the last engagement party. The Shin and Sue families had gone all out to make this engagement a grand affair. Everyone with a name in Washington, D.C. had received an invitation. The engagement party was even bigger than a typical wedding. I knew why Mr. and Mrs. Sue insisted on me coming, to prove that the twins they spoke of were real. After all, no one would think that I could stand here so calmly if we weren't twins. Susan Wansheen, relying on Mr. and Mrs. Sue's favoritism, had used many tricks, so much so that half an hour into the banquet, no one dared to talk to me. Seeing me being neglected, Susan Wansheen gloated and came to show off. So what if you're the Sue family's eldest daughter? Mom and Dad, and even Emilywas, have chosen to stand by my side. As for your brother, he'll eventually abandon me and like me even more. 5 years of affection is enough to erase that little bit of childhood sentiment. I gently swirled my wine glass and suddenly said, you and Emilywas are destined not to be together. Susan Wansheen was about to get angry when a servant urged her to hurry up and prepare, as the engagement party was about to officially begin. Before leaving, Susan Wansheen didn't forget to say fiercely, Susan Yanley, who do you think you are? Sean and I will be happy together forever. As if to prevent me from causing trouble, several black-suited bodyguards immediately surrounded me as the engagement party was about to begin. The two families took turns giving speeches on stage, and Emilywas and Susan Wansheen were filled with joy and shyness. The host smiled and said, Mr. Shin and Miss Sue have such a great relationship. Let's congratulate them together, shall we? Crash! The sound of congratulations was interrupted by the sudden shattering of a wine glass. Everyone looked over, their eyes focused on me. They can't get married. Hearing this, Mrs. Sue rushed down, scolding, Yanley, what are you doing? Even Susan. Sichuan, who had always stood by my side, softened his voice and advised, Yanley, didn't you say you didn't object to the engagement? Let's not make a scene, okay? I looked up in surprise and smiled. When did I say I didn't object? Besides, I'm saving them. After all, how can half-siblings be together? As soon as these words came out, there was an uproar. At the same time, on the screen behind Emilywas and Susan Wansheen, many intimate photos of Mr. Shin and the same woman appeared, as well as photos of the woman holding a child, and finally, several DNA test reports. Everyone, do you see clearly? I asked with a smile, then turned the spear directly at Susan Wansheen. As for the truth, Susan Wansheen, oh no. Linda Wanxiao, you should know best whether what I said is true or false. Wanxiao, which person with Xiao in their name are you trying to save? Your mother was deeply in love, but ultimately couldn't compare to the allure of profit. She was kicked out, gave birth to you, and then came to the Su family as a nanny to take care of the Su family's eldest daughter. Because of the Su family's rules, you couldn't go out. You ran out for fun and accidentally met the Shin family's eldest son. You happily told your mother, but your mother's face changed, and she insisted on taking you away. You refused and knelt in front of me, begging me with tears. In the end, I came forward and persuaded your mother to stay. But why did you deliberately lure the kidnappers over after learning that the Shin and Su families intended to form a marriage alliance? One photo and video after another played on the screen, all verifying my words. Susan Wansheen was devastated and rushed up, picking up a fruit knife from the table and stabbing me. I kicked away the fruit knife and kicked her to the ground. Linda Wanxiao, I've treated you well, haven't I? Why did you repay kindness with hatred? That's what you deserve. Susan Wansheen looked at me resentfully, then suddenly turned her gaze to Mr. and Mrs. Su. Do you think you can be safe and sound without me? Where did I get the ability to lure the kidnappers? It was your parents who wanted you dead. Exclamations rang out from all directions, and Susan Sichuan roared, what nonsense are you talking about? Am I talking nonsense? Susan Wansheen laughed even more maniacally, pointing at Susan Sichuan and saying, Susan Sichuan, what are you pretending for? Haven't you ever wondered? You were born weak and sickly, and it was said that you wouldn't live past 18. Why did your body get better and better after Susan Yanley was born, while the always healthy Susan Yanley became weak? That's because she was born for you. Your parents switched your destinies. They even made up lies to prevent her from appearing in front of others. All of this was for you. Susan Sichuan looked at Mr. and Mrs. Su in disbelief, but saw them avoiding his gaze. Seeing Susan Sichuan's devastated appearance, Susan Wansheen was even more triumphant. But I didn't expect Susan Yanley to be born with a noble destiny, and the formation to switch destinies was too slow. So they hardened their hearts and wanted to create a way for kidnappers to abduct her, selling her to a small mountain village to suffer and weaken her destiny. I just helped a little. Without me, the next time, she would have died sooner or later. Your parents knew all of this from the beginning, so not only did they not blame me, but they also gave me a large sum of money to leave. Looking for Susan Yanley all these years has actually been a lie to you. Isn't that laughable? You were the one who caused Susan Yanley to be abducted, but you were also the one who wanted her back the most. They even knew that I wasn't Susan Yanley, but they still forged a DNA test to deceive you. Shut up! Susan Sichuan couldn't help but shout, rushing to Mr. and Mrs. Su and asking, Dad, Mom, say something. Isn't all of this true? Mrs. Su couldn't bear to turn her head away and said softly, Sichuan, Mom and Dad had no choice. You are our son, we watched you grow up little by little. How could we watch you die? Isn't Yanley your daughter too? Susan Sichuan was devastated, staggering and bumping into the table. She's also your daughter. You always said she was a lucky star, that the family business improved after she was born, and my illness also got better. But you actually wanted to kill her. Occupying the nest of another bird, repaying kindness with hatred, bringing disaster. Master Yuan Tian, your calculations were accurate. As soon as he finished speaking, Susan Sichuan suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and collapsed to the ground. Sichuan, Sichuan. Mr. and Mrs. Su quickly helped Susan Sichuan up, saying in a panic, How could this be? How could this be? Are you looking for this? A wooden plate suddenly hung from my palm, engraved with complex runes. You. Mrs. Su widened her eyes, then looked at me in horror. You know everything? I smiled sarcastically and said, Of course I know. I didn't die, you're afraid he'll have another problem, right? So you sought out the priest who helped you switch destinies, hiding this wooden plate and countless runes in the things you sent me. You were hoping day and night that I would die, so that you could succeed. But there's one more thing, that priest lied to you. From the beginning, he wanted me. My destiny is extremely noble, and since I can save the Su family's business, I can naturally help him get rid of his ailments. You thought it was switching destinies that made his body better, but you don't know that it's because he's been with me day and night. If you hadn't done anything, his illness would have gotten better long ago. But I also want to thank you for creating this drama, allowing me to meet my master. Mr. and Mrs. Su widened their eyes and shook their heads. Impossible. You must be lying to me. You liar. The sound of sirens came from afar, and many people in the room turned pale. I avoided Mrs. Su's touch and chuckled. I said, This engagement party won't go on. I've collected evidence of all the illegal activities of the Shen and Su families and handed it over to the police. And Linda Wanqiao, you wanted to impersonate me and be with Shan Yuezhou. Your mother wanted to stop you and told you the truth, but you burned her alive in a mental hospital. And the 37 people who were affected, this is all your retribution. Susan Wanxin's face changed, and she wanted to go to Shan Yuezhou. But Shan Yuezhou retreated repeatedly, his eyes filled with fear. Susan Wanxin looked at him in disbelief and suddenly laughed loudly. Shan, you're afraid of me? You're actually afraid of me? I've done so much for you, and you're actually afraid of me? Laughing, she suddenly picked up the fruit knife on the ground and rushed towards Shan Yuezhou. Blood spurted out, splashing on Susan Wanxin's face. She said softly, Shan, it's okay. This way, we'll be together forever. Screams filled the scene, but I turned around, leaving everything behind, and walked towards the door step by step. My master was waiting for me outside. He didn't ask much, just said, Hurry up and follow. Any later, and that lily seed sweet soup will be cold. I couldn't help but smile and responded heavily, stepping forward and following. Those who do wrong will eventually pay the price. Disasters are eliminated, and my new life is right before my eyes.